Hey everyone, and welcome to RUBIN'S Mind Lab, where we break down the latest research into what it really means. Ever wonder why you can feel so many different emotions and why sometimes they all blend together while other times they feel so distinct? Today we're diving into a fascinating study that explores how we experience and measure our momentary feelings and why it matters more than you might think. Think about it, our emotions aren't usually one single thing. We can feel happy, sad, anxious, angry, stressed, excited, and so many other shades of feeling often within the same day. Scientists call this momentary affect, how we feel right here, right now. And researchers who study this often use surveys asking us to rate how we feel on a scale. But here is the tricky part. And the core question of this research, are all those emotion words interchangeable? Does sad mean the same thing to everyone, or even for the same person as stressed or angry? This study argues that when we measure emotions, we often lump different feelings together, or assume they all point to one single underlying feeling like negative affect. But what if anger is a really different experience from sadness, and our models don't account for that? That is a big problem for understanding ourselves and for comparing findings across different research studies. Imagine one study asks about sad and anxious, while another asks about depressed and stressed. How can we truly compare those results if we don't understand the unique flavor of each emotion word? This paper tackles this item heterogeneity, the idea that different words for emotions actually capture different, interchangeable experiences. The researchers looked at a huge database of studies that track people's feelings moment by moment. They found that while certain emotion words pop up a lot, like happy, sad, angry, anxious, stress, the exact combination of words used to measure feelings often varies wildly from one study to another. This is like trying to compare apples and oranges, but calling them both fruit. They point out that while sad and depressed might feel similar, anger and anxiety feel quite different. This is especially true for negative emotions, which seem to be more nuanced and differentiated than positive ones. So, what exactly is this? Item heterogeneity. It is basically how much each individual word or item we use to measure an emotion actually captures something unique about that feeling. For example, feeling angry might involve a lot of energy and a desire to act, while feeling sad might be more about withdrawal and low energy. These are different experiences, even though both are negative. This is similar to how different tools in the toolbox have different purposes. You wouldn't use a hammer to saw wood. The researchers explained that in many studies, the typical way to deal with these different emotion words is to either average them all together to get a general negative affect score, or to assume there is one underlying negative affect factor that all these words are measuring. They argue this is a simplification that can hide important differences. They ran some analysis on existing data and looked at how individual people's emotions change over time. They found that the way one person's anger changes day to day is not perfectly linked to how their sadness changes. This is shown in figures like this one, where they look at the autoregressive effects, that is basically how much yesterday's feeling predicts today's feeling. They saw that these effects varied quite a bit between different emotion words, even within the same person. If you average everything together, you might miss that for one person. Their anger might be very stable, but their anxiety fluctuates a lot, and vice versa for someone else. They also looked at models where they assumed a single underlying affect factor, even when they allowed people to have different loadings on this factor, meaning some people might experience sadness more strongly than anxiety. When reporting negative affect, they still found that the core affect factor didn't explain much of the variation in the individual emotion words. This suggests that these words aren't just different ways of pointing to the same thing, they have their own unique dynamics. So, what is their big idea? They propose a new way to model emotions that doesn't ignore these differences. They call it a reference item approach. Imagine you pick one emotion word, say sad, as your anchor, your reference point. Then, you look at how other emotions like angry or stressed relate to sad in real time. Here is a simplified picture of how that works. We have our reference item, sad. Then we have other items like stressed, angry, and fearful. The model looks at how much stressed is related to sad at the same moment. If they're very closely related for a person, it means they might not be differentiating much between feeling stressed and feeling sad. The study allows these relationships to be unique for each person, giving us person-specific indices of item specificity. This is like having a thermometer for how well you tell apart different feelings. They then calculated these item specificity coefficients. These numbers tell us how much an individual person differentiates between different emotions. The results were really interesting. Most people showed pretty good differentiation, meaning they could tell apart feelings like anger and sadness. Look at these box plots. For most people, the numbers are high, suggesting they clearly distinguish between different negative feelings. But there is always a small group of people who show less differentiation. This means the model can actually highlight who might struggle to tell their emotions apart. They also looked at how emotions carry over from one moment to the next. For example, does feeling stressed today make you feel stressed tomorrow, or does it more likely lead to feeling sad tomorrow? Now, the really important part, how do these different ways of measuring emotions relate to things like depression, loneliness, or self-esteem? They compared their new model to the old ways of just averaging emotions, or using a single factor. They found that when they looked at item-specific dynamics, they often got clearer pictures. For instance, the inertia or how long a feeling lasts, how much yesterday's feeling predicts today's for sad, and angry were more consistently linked to outcomes like depression than the average score. This suggests that when one specific emotion is stuck, it has a stronger impact than a general dip in negative effect. Crucially, their reference item approach makes studies more comparable. They showed that even when they removed or added certain emotion words to the analysis, the key findings about the reference item and its relationship to other items stayed pretty much the same. This means if everyone uses sad as a reference, we can compare studies even if they use different sets of other emotion words. This is a huge step for building a consistent understanding of emotions across the field. So, what are the big takeaways here? First, our emotions are more complex and differentiated than we often give them credit for. Second, the way we measure emotions really matters. Simply averaging or assuming a single factor can hide important individual differences and make it hard to compare research. Third, this new reference item approach offers a powerful way to study these fine-grained emotional dynamics, and it makes it easier to connect findings across different studies. What are the limitations? Well, the researchers point out that if the emotion words themselves aren't very reliable, meaning people answer inconsistently, then even their sophisticated model might have trouble. So it is still important to use good, well-tested emotion words. Also, their model is a bit complex to implement, requiring specialized software and statistical knowledge. But what does this mean for us? It means that when you are thinking about your own emotions, recognizing the unique flavors of anger, sadness, anxiety, and stress can be really helpful. It might be the key to understanding why you feel stuck in a certain mood or why you react to situations in specific ways. For researchers, this work provides a much needed tool to build a more accurate and comparable science of emotion. It's a reminder that understanding the nuances of our inner lives is a complex but incredibly rewarding endeavor. What do you think about this research? Have you ever felt like certain emotions blend together for you while others feel very distinct? Let me know in the comments below. And if you found this breakdown helpful, please give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to RUBIN'S Mind Lab for more science explained simply, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next episode. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.